Years ago, I did something for my television affiliates around the country where I did a special report on Babcock Ranch. And you may or may not have ever heard of Babcock Ranch, but it is a from the ground up community that was built in right near Fort Myers, Florida, right where there was such extreme devastation from the hurricane, from Ian, with loss of life and billions of dollars in property destruction. And the dislocation for people, the trauma, and just trying to put their lives back together is so brutal. And then power went out, as always happens with these things, for millions of people. Well, the reality is we don't know if the increasing frequency of storms, fires out west, hurricanes, if this cycle is going to go on for decades to come or is suddenly just going to go away. But there are things we can do that make a difference. And going back to Babcock Ranch was constructed with the possibility of increasing storm frequency from the ground up. This community was built with stricter standards on building. And in fact, the areas around Babcock Ranch used Babcock Ranch's public buildings as shelters because they knew they were built to these standards that would be able to withstand an extreme hurricane. The property damage in the community of Babcock Ranch, minimal. And the lights never went off. If you ever saw my TV special on Babcock Ranch, they have this massive array of solar that not only powers Babcock Ranch, but powers a lot of areas of Florida as well, with battery backup, so that they have power even when vast swaths of territory around them did not. The homes were okay, and the power stayed on. In California, there are communities being built, new communities being built that are de-gridded from the utility companies that have had trouble being reliable with power, and then we've got the wildfires and all that. And you can now build a neighborhood from the ground up with what are called microgrids, where they can rely just on themselves for power through solar and with the battery. And this is a wave of the future. But the other thing, the building standards. Puerto Rico took the first hit from Ian, and the island was without power, a lot of property damage yet again. After Puerto Rico had been through so much with Maria, what was that, 5 years ago, I guess, that was so destructive. And there are builders that have been building in Puerto Rico that have been building with both these things in mind. What do you do to build a property that can be hurricane resistant? Nothing's invincible, but hurricane resistant, and that has its own power source. And there are homes in Puerto Rico that when neighbors had nothing left after Ian, they're still fine. The reality is we can do this. We can do this. There's a real advantages to having microgrids and people having their own power sources, just because it's a known that foreign actors, probably foreign governments that wish us harm, are going to have moments where they decide, it'd be really great to cause a blackout somewhere. The more we become self-reliant, the better it is. The more we improve our building standards and building codes, so we build structures that are more able to survive the kind of extreme events that could happen. Governor DeSantis was talking about how This was, I guess, a 500-year flood in a lot of areas. One that's mathematically only supposed to happen once every 500 years, and then there it was. And that kind of thing happens more often. Krista, you went through this, and I'm sorry to drag up what was such a brutal time for you and your family's life 13 years ago, when your home was nearly completely destroyed and heavily damaged by a 1,000-year flood, was it?
I think it was.
Mathematically, a 1 in 1,000-year chance, which is not the same as happening every 1,000 years, but it means it's the risk level was so low, and you then rebuilt that home to a standard where that will not happen again.
Yeah.
It's up 9
feet. We moved from that home since, but yeah, we did.
Put it up 9 feet, reinforce the structure, and you built a home that will stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was quite a journey you went on to do that. But I remember back when you were buying the home and there had been questions in your mind about the possibility of flooding, and your neighbor's like, this doesn't flood. You're fine.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Well, I learned my lesson. I would not buy in a flood zone again, for sure.
Well, see,
I'm only going to be up on a hill.
All right, I hear that, but so much of the country, so much land is we populate these urban and suburban areas, more places are going to be subject to flooding.
Right.
So what do you do up front to make it a safer structure? These are the kind of things we've got to think about.
And fire, you have to think about all those things.
Fire risk,
to happen to anyone, yeah.
And so what is the risk where you are? And even if you're not in an area you're told is likely at danger, as you were by who became your neighbors, you all suffered together from the consequences of the flood. Your answer, PTSD, is you're never going to be on low ground again.
Well, yeah. It was actually, I know, we were very fortunate compared to other people, so I cannot complain about that. It was actually a very good lesson in the end for me about how the material stuff means nothing. It was really a very needed lesson for me. I didn't care about all my clothes being ruined, all the furniture. It was just the little things that mattered. So I would say make sure your photos and your other things are in a place where you could get them.